I just wanted to really quickly show my books from this year and rate them from my lowest rated to my highest rated. I want to start by saying that like the way that I review books, I rate every book very differently depending on what the book is about, what tropes it has, what universe it's in. I rate things very contextually. You might see me rate a very loved classic with a very low rating and then like something that would be considered like fanfic with a high rating, and I want you to know it's because I rate every book differently. A 1-star book is like I could not connect to anything on this. Like there's nothing tangible for me to think that was good. I can rate something 1 star and still have like a laugh at it, but typically 1 star just means that I don't have any genuine enjoyment from this book. For me, a 2 star is like there was some things that I could like grab onto that I was like, ooh yes, this, but I didn't get enough of that thing, or that thing was the only thing that stood out to me. 3 stars is kind of like the I liked it. Okay, 3 stars is not a bad book. In my rating, to me, a 3 stars is I like this book, but there's nothing like that I love about it. The books that I rate 4 stars is usually the books that I liked a lot, but there's just little things that I would change, little parts of the story that I didn't like. The pacing might have felt a little awkward. The third act breakup might have been annoying. Like there's things like that take a book from 5 stars to 4 stars. 5 stars is the easiest to rate. It's basically just like I, there's nothing wrong with it. Even if there is like a little thing that I might change, I would still think like overall this book has that like feeling. I have read 39 books out of 50 books, which is my goal. And it's halfway through the year, which I know is kind of like weird because it seems like I was selling myself short. That's hard to say. It seems like I was selling myself short on that goal, but I really wasn't, because the year before I read like 24 books. Freshman year is when I really started reading, and I think I read like 40 books. And so the next year I made my goal 50 books, which sophomore year was absolute hell for me, so that's probably why. But regardless, I did not read very much in sophomore year. So then I decided the year of my junior year, I was gonna make it 50, because that's still like double the books I read last year, almost double the books I read last year. So I figured that that would be a good goal for me. And then I ended up reading like 19 books in 1 month. So now the whole goal is like out of whack. I'm gonna start from my 1 stars and then go to my 5 stars. By far the worst book that I read this year was The Fine Print. There is nothing about this book that I like at all. It's about some brooding guy who abuses his employees and doesn't pay them enough money, and one of his employees who ironically enough fights for employee rights, and then she ends up still being a massive pushover, and it takes him to fall in love with a girl to realize that he's a bad person. I was like duped into reading because this was like 4.5 stars overall on Goodreads. And then I read it and I was like, what? I can imagine reading it like just as a little haha joke. Actually, no, I can't. I'm not even lying. I can't. There's nothing. This book made me feel just like this emptiness. Like there was nothing for me to like grab onto. Closely followed is another 1 star, Terms and Conditions, which is the second book to The Fine Print. So I read this book before I read The Fine Print, and I gotta say it's still a 1 star, but it is more entertaining than The Fine Print. It's just like a little mess. I hate the tropes in this, which brought it down even further. Like it's like arranged marriage, which I hate that trope. It's like the forced proximity thing as well, which I also hate. I hated the tropes. I hated the characters. Declan is a horrible person, and I never want to read that ever again. Moving on to our 2-star books, we have How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. This is a nonfiction book where it's about how racism is integrated into our society today, and it's a great topic, and it's written pretty well, but I really didn't like the narrator. He interviews people throughout the book, and I thought that the way that the interviews went was kind of like messy. The story was good. Who told the story was not executed well. Next we have Stuck With You, which is an Ali Hazelwood novella, or not really a novella, it's like a mini story. I'm pretty sure novellas are usually to be read with a series. These were just like standalone little short stories. So Stuck With You is basically just like a workplace romance, which Ali Hazelwood does do very well. but I wasn't a fan of how the story was told. It was like okay, basically just like these two people, like they end up hooking up, and then like later on they have like this thing where they get trapped in an elevator together, and since they hooked up, like a bunch of stuff has happened, so then they're like forced to talk to each other about it, which it's like forced proximity thing, and it's also like a one night stand trope, and those are two things that I just don't enjoy very much. The writing was fine. I find it really difficult to bond with characters when it's in such a short period of time. Then we have Icebreaker. I should have said this in my first rank of 2 stars because oh my god, this book is terrible. The only reason it's a 2-star instead of a 1-star is because there were little things that made me giggle. I won't lie, but oh my god, these characters were so goddamn unlikable, especially Anastasia. And also the plot was not it. Like that whole thing with her skating partner, I was like, I don't care. It was overhyped so much on TikTok, and it also made me kind of uncomfortable. Next we have Red Queen. So this is a dystopian, and I was really excited because dystopians don't come by very often, and it's one of my favorite genres. So I was kind of excited for this until I found out it's basically the summer I turned pretty trope with the whole two brothers thing, but it's dystopian and people have powers. Never felt the stakes of this book. It always felt very like mellow, very calm. I was never worried about anything like the Hunger Games. Like when you read that, I've read it so many times and still every time I read it, I get that like anxious feeling of like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? I know what's gonna happen. I didn't know what was gonna happen when I was reading Red Queen and I didn't care. And the romance had no like anything going on. It had no flavor, it had no spice. Next we have Book Lovers. Yes, I rated this at 2 stars. It's a high 2 stars, but it's still 2 stars. I don't know why this book just did not do it for me. I just was not a fan. Like, I genuinely cannot remember a single thing about this book. I don't know why. I thought I was gonna love it because, like, as a workaholic who loves books, I thought I was gonna love this book because that's how the main character is, but I really just didn't resonate with it, like, at all. And I can't tell you anything about the book because I don't remember. It's Twisted, which is by Emily McIntyre. She has this series that's, like, Disney premise, and it's like the same characters, but like you kind of flip around the story a bit. So the movie Aladdin, so basically it was about that, but Yasmin is the main character and Jafar is and his name is like Julian or something in the book, and Jafar is the love interest. What's the point of making it a dark romance if Jafar is actually secretly a good person? I mean, I know he still like murders people in the book, but like overall he's a good person though, and like he has good intentions. Why can't there be a dark romance book where the girl just falls for a terrible person? But that's like really nitpicky of me. Like she can write it however she wants to. That's just how I thought it was gonna be, and then it wasn't like that, so I was a little disappointed. My last 2-star book is The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. Christina Lauren is a huge like hit or miss author for me. Like either her books like just do it for me, I love it, it's great, or I'm just like it's okay, I guess. This was so cringe to me. I think it's just because there's kids in it, which like if you watched any of my videos, you know my beef with kids in books. Like they're always so annoying. Either kids in books are like so frustrating and annoying because they're so like childlike, or they are like way too wise beyond their years. The kids from freaking The Long Game by Elena Armas, right? I DNF'd that book because the kids were so annoying. Anyways, that book, those kids, so annoying, so childish, so frustrating. Kind of the same with The True Love Experiment. Verity by Colleen Hoover. Why was the kid in that book so smart? I don't remember his name. I just remember it was boat themed. It'll come to me later, probably. The kid was way too emotionally smart. Like he was like talking about his dead mother and stuff like that, and he was like playing dumb, but like you could tell he knew. But it was like, could a kid play dumb like that? Like I don't think so. Oh, his name was Crew. Colleen Hoover needs to change the names of her people. No, because tell me why I could literally make an entire video on just how weird Colleen Hoover's characters' names are. Next, moving on to 3-star books, The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. So this book wasn't bad by any means, it was just boring. But I will say that end was kind of crazy, so that's why it's a 3 instead of a 2, because the end was actually like so dramatic, and I love a dramatic ending. Next we have A Good Girl Complex. One of the most complicated book premises I have ever seen in my life. Not even in the way that it's like complicated with like the people that are in it, but it's the way that the characters think that like you would never think this way. The premise is that Cooper gets fired from his job because I've literally explained this in like 2 videos before. Okay, it's fine. Cooper gets fired from his job because he beats up he beats up a guy who groped his co-worker, right? So he gets fired from his job. He finds out that one of the girls, Mackenzie, is dating that guy who got him fired. It's sort of like an Outer Banks scenario type thing. We're on this like island thing where the guy who gropes the girl is rich, and so is his girlfriend Mackenzie, and then Cooper is poorer, and the girl who was who got groped is also poorer, and they have their own little friend group. And then the rich side of things, they have their own little friend group thing, right? So basically, Cooper's plan is to get Mackenzie to fall in love with him so that he can embarrass Mackenzie and, by extension, the guy who got him fired. So that's his whole like plot, is like,
I'll make her fall in love with me, right? And I already know that he's cheating on her, right? So then I'll get her to fall in love with me, and then I'll confront them both as cheaters at like a party or something, and then I'll embarrass both of them.
and it'll be like a cute little setup thing, right? And he pitches this to his friends, and his friends, it's actually so funny how they pretend that this is something that would come to a normal person's brain, because they talk about it in their friend group, and their friends like all come up with it together, and they're like, yeah, great idea, that's a great idea, I think that. And somehow it works. We have ACOTAR. So this is the first book in the series. I will say that I'm reading the second one right now, and I do like that one a lot more. The first one didn't really do it for me. There was definitely towards the end, I ended up liking it a lot more. I think the only reason I didn't like it at the beginning is because I couldn't stand Tamlin as a character. He was just so boring. Overall, I don't really have much to say about this book. The scenery's good, the characters are good, except for Tamlin. But yeah, it was my first like brush with fantasy in a really long time, and I enjoyed it. It was okay. Next we have Under One Roof. This is the same book as the like short stories book that Ali Hazelwood had, and I like this one a lot more than the Stuck With You one. So this is the one where like two people get the same house because they were both friends with the same old lady, except for one of them was related. It's the guy who was related to her, and the girl who was just like friends with her. So they both get this house when she dies, right? And basically you see how they struggle to live together and how they don't really like each other, and she thinks that he hated her, like his grandma that died, and he thinks that she's like intruding by living in the house even though the grandma gave it to her. So yeah, basically it's a pretty good story, I guess. It's still not developed super well. I think it's just hard to develop a story as complex as that one in 100 pages, but it was still done pretty well, and I liked the characters, and their banter was cute. Next is Twisted Lies. This book disappointed me so much because I did read the Twisted series like in its entirety. I made a video about it at one point. But basically, so I read it in like a totally whack order. I read Twisted Love, Twisted Hate, Twisted Games, Twisted Lies. So I kind of jumped around a bit. Twisted Lies was my least favorite for sure. Twisted Love had weird characters, but Twisted Lies was still worse. It was so boring that like I felt like nothing was happening, even though low-key, like Christian whatever the hell, like he was definitely the most like dangerous out of the 4 guys in that series, but he was the most boring in my opinion. Like there was nothing about him that was like funny. He was not interesting. He had zero sense of humor. I did not enjoy that at all. And Josh Chen is like best of both worlds because yeah, he like still makes quite a bit of money because he's a doctor and everything, but he's not like out of touch and rude. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of why I enjoyed him as a character more than the rest of them, because he actually felt like a real human being. I did like Stella though. I thought she was really fun and interesting, and social media influenced her baddie, so I liked her. Like it was still like okay. It was just really disappointing in comparison to the rest of the series, and especially because it was the longest book. I was like, I do not need 400 pages or however many pages there is in that book. Like I did not need that much. Give me 200, I'm chill. I would have probably rated it at 4 stars if there was only 200 pages. Next is Becoming Michelle Obama. These books are so like, there's so much range of like what I read. This book was actually pretty good. I actually really liked reading it. I read this for my AP Lang class. Literally, I read like 5 books in 1 week to study for AP Lang, and then I ended up not using any of them in my essays. I literally used a book that I read like 4 years ago in my AP Lang essays. And I said the wrong year. Also, I get my scores back tomorrow, and I'm so scared. Like I'm actually so scared what like thing I'll get. If I got a good score and I like edit this after like tomorrow, then I'll put the score I got in. But if it was a bad score, I might not put it in because I can't handle the shame. I got a 4. So it's fine. It'll be fine. I'll do better next year. We're not focusing on that. I'm in a spiral if I start talking about that. Overall, I mean, I don't really think people care what I rate Michelle Obama's book. Basically, it's an autobiography. I thought it was pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, she actually was really good at writing and telling a story. I don't know if she had a ghostwriter. It was good though. I liked it. Next is Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This book is pretty like simple in its subject matter. It's just a small town girl. She works at a flower shop. Her sister-in-law's bodyguard has come to town. This is a little spin-off from When in Rome, if you're confused. But basically, so her sister-in-law's bodyguard has come to town to keep after her sister-in-law. So in that amount of time, they kind of become friends, and her whole thing is she can't be vulnerable with people, and he's kind of like that too. So they kind of work on that like together, and they'll try and like figure out like, okay, I need to figure out how to date people, and you need to figure out how to actually talk to people. So we're gonna try and do that together. She is YA, but it's not like stupid YA. Not to like sound mean about YA books, love YA books, they raised me, but some YA books and like the climax of the book is that they like hold hands. And I'm like, okay, great, I guess. Next is A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I was so excited for this book, and I had actually been putting it off for so long because I was so nervous about how I feel about it. And I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed, which I wasn't super surprised that I was disappointed though. I was kind of expecting to be disappointed, but I was still disappointed because The Hunger Games, the first book, so good, amazing. I love it. It's a classic read. I reread it all the time. Catching Fire, even better than the first one somehow, literally so good. The third one, terrible. I hated it. It took me forever to read. I could not get into it. I could not put it up. Like I could not like open that book and start reading it. Like I had to convince myself to read that book. Like every single time I reread that series, I dread that third book because we're gonna be in boring ass District 13. Yeah, my favorite part of that book is when they all put on their gray jumpsuits and do nothing. So much of that book is literally just us doing nothing in District 13. That's why I hate the third one. So I didn't really think I would love the prequel. I sort of felt like Suzanne Collins had like milked whatever she could out of this series. But then she decided coming back with a prequel, and I was like, you know what? Let's do it. I thought Snow's character was really interesting. Honestly, is he really that bad of a person? It felt like odd to me because I totally understood where he was coming from. Maybe that makes me sound like a sociopath and everyone just will think I'm crazy when I say this. But then I felt like the comparison between who he is in the prequel and who he is in the Hunger Games is so separate to me. I thought that was supposed to make me like, oh, that's why he's the way he is. So it doesn't make sense why you felt the need to do that to a 16-year-old girl because she reminds you of your ex-girlfriend. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, there's no way, unless he's just petty. But if he's just petty and that's why he is the way he is, then why did we have a whole prequel talking about it? Not that a prequel needs to, like, humanize a villain, but that's kind of what it felt like it was trying to do until the end of the book, where I was like, wait, but this still doesn't, like, explain half of his character's actions. So I just thought that it was good. I liked the characters. I just felt that there was still such a huge disconnect between the original series and the prequel. But I did hear that there's going to be another prequel because I guess Suzanne needs more money, guys. I did hear that there's gonna be another prequel, and it's gonna be on Haymitch's Game, which I will totally read. The last book for my 3 stars is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This is a very big departure from Ali Hazelwood's usual book content. Typically, she is a writer of romance, and it's typically a workplace romance. In this book, it's a vampire werewolf thing, first of all. It talks about alpha males and all that stuff. I actually didn't mind this book. There was some things that I don't really want to talk about some of the stuff that happened in this book. There's a thing called nodding in this book. I don't really want to talk about it though. I enjoyed most of it. I just thought that some of the things was like weird, but I dismissed most of the weird things because Ali Hazelwood, like, she knows, you know, like Ali Hazelwood is not trying to be like the next Shakespeare. She's genuinely, like, you can tell in Ali Hazelwood's writing that she is having fun writing, and that's one of the things that I love about her writing. So I still really enjoyed this book, and I would eat up another fantasy book from her. I just this one didn't fully do it for me, but it was still good. I still enjoyed it. It just makes me feel kind of weird for some reason. I don't really know why. This book just makes me feel weird. Okay, next we were talking about 4 stars. This takes up like the majority of the stuff that I rated, I'm pretty sure, is 4-star books. Starting with Shatter Me, I reread this for the first time since I was like 12. I'm currently working on a vlog about the entire series, but rereading it, I thought I wasn't gonna like it as much because I was like, you know, I'm older now. Like, I really liked it when I first like read it, but I don't think I would like it anymore. And I have noticed that a lot of the people that do like it, it's sort of like a nostalgia thing for them. And Steph made a video talking about it. I don't remember. It was in one of her wrap-up videos. I didn't watch like the full Shatter Me reading vlog by her because I didn't want it to be spoiled for me when I finally did a vlog on it. But basically she talked about it and she said like, oh, I think I would have really loved this book if I like read it at like the peak time for me to read it when I was like 12 or 13, but since I read it later, I don't really love it that much. I love this book. It is genuinely like so much fun. Is the writing good? No. The writing is really not that good, but it was still fun and it brought me back to my little Wattpad days, and I just love it. And I love a dystopian. Dystopian is just one of the tropes that like, it has to be done well, but when it's done well, it's so good. If its writing was better, I would totally rate it a 5 stars. Next is Bad Girl Reputation. This is a follow-up to The Good Girl Complex, and oh my gosh, I liked this book so much more. The characters were better, the plot was better, everything about it was just so much better, and there was more tension, there was more going on, and I liked the characters so much more. Next we have Check and Mate, which is another Ali Hazelwood book. It is Ali Hazelwood's only YA book, I believe. Which, okay, I don't really mind that it's a YA book. My only thing is that it doesn't feel like a YA book. Like, usually when I read a YA book, I think, okay, so there's not going to be, like, they might make a few, like, sex comments, but there will not be anything really that sexual. But the amount of times that they talk about sex is crazy. This does not feel like a YA book, like, at all. Like, the only thing that is keeping it YA is because nothing graphic actually happens, but they talk about it way too much for it to be a YA book. Like, if I was a parent and was told that this was a YA book and I was like, oh, okay, I'll let my kid read it then, I would not let my kid read this book. They talked about like tentacle. How can you talk about that in a YA book? You cannot like say that. But I still enjoyed the book overall. Next we have The Honeymoon Crashers. This is by Christina Lauren. This is one of the Christina Lauren books that did it for me. It's a shorter book, so it's also really easy to get through. It's very much like uptight girl, and then it's like a surfer boy, and they have to plan this wedding together, and it's so much fun. And there's like micro tropes in it. Like, there's a little bit of fake dating, there's a little bit of like forced proximity, but it's so much fun. And I just love how like they go from like hating each other to like having to work together to like realizing that they maybe like each other more. Next we have Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This one was so dramatic also. It kind of gave the vibe of like the end of the Catherine Center book. There was so much going on in this book. It was a little unrealistic just because of like the setup. Because it's basically like 2 people on social media. They have no idea that it's like the 2 of them that are like talking to each other for some reason. Like, they have no idea that it's each other, but the way that they talk about each other, it's so obvious that they're talking about each other. So there was so many times in the book where I was like, how do you not realize that it's her? And then also the NASA thing was like, they were working on like some brain chemistry thing, and it was very unrealistic, which I didn't mind though. I don't mind that. The main thing that bothered me was the way that they interacted with each other online, and I was like, how do you not realize that it's each other? I don't know, characters are stupid sometimes, but other than that, love that book. Next is The Handmaid's Tale. This book is so good, but it's also so extremely graphic, and I don't plan on rereading it anytime soon because it was very graphic. And also on Goodreads it said that it was the first book, so I don't know if there is a second book. I would love a second book because the ending really frustrated me. But yeah, it's very graphic, but I think the overall subject matter is really important. And I know it's been like banned from a lot of schools, which I think makes it even more important that if a school doesn't want to have a conversation about a book, then it's got to be saying something that's provoking. So yeah, I read it mainly because of that, because I wanted to see why it was getting banned from schools. And I honestly didn't really see why it was getting banned from schools. It seemed like a very important conversation to me. It has a lot of commentary. It has a dystopian setting, but it's used to talk about a lot of like regular, like domestic issues. So I personally really enjoyed that because it's the type of book where you can divulge in issues that we experience today, but you don't have to have the current like perception of this is about today, because it's not set in today's timeline. So you can kind of like feel freely and think in your own head instead of the way that people around you might react to it in modern day. Next, we have 1,000 Boy Kisses. This was almost a 5 stars. The writing was like weird, kind of. I don't know if I love the writing. The characters are a little cringy, but it is YA, so I think that's kind of like the point, is that they're like young and in love. And the ending made me cry so bad. If it didn't have that earth-shattering ending, I would not have really rated it very high at all. But because it was so sad, and whenever I think about it, it genuinely like makes me almost cry when I think about it, I almost rated it 5 stars, despite the writing, despite how the characters were. But then the epilogue came in, and that was the worst epilogue I've ever read in my entire life. And I wish I would have looked up before. Like, oh, I wish somebody would have warned me, because it felt like the point of the book is that these two people are important by themselves. They may love each other so much, but they are important by themselves. They do not need each other to be important. And then the epilogue totally ruined that for me. Next is Happy Place by Emily Henry. This book was so good. The characters were incredible. Reading about friend groups that have like known each other for so long and they all stay connected throughout their like time, and like how much each person would do for that friend group is something that I just really liked and I really enjoy in books. And especially when you get to see the dynamics inside that friend group of each characters and how each character connects. I love that so much. The only thing that I didn't really love about it was just like how sad it was, and I hate when books flip back and forth between past and present. It annoys me so much. I don't know why, but it just does. Next, we have The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. This is sort of like a Groundhog Day sort of thing. So honestly, the thing that makes it really like fun to me is the concept, and it also kind of felt like that one scene in like Beaver Towns where they're like going out together through that whole night. Next, we have Betting on You by Lynn Painter. I like how this book took such like simple elements of life and made them so interesting, and really just went into detail of certain issues that people just go through, and no one really stops to think about how important that is to someone's life. And a big part of this book is the main girl and her relationship with her parents, and same with the main boy in this book, and how it affects each of them differently. And that's something I've always found really interesting, is just how different people react to the same things. And that's explored a lot through this book. And then of course it's also a romance book, so it's still really cute and there's still a lot going on, but emotionally this book was just so mature, and that's why I loved reading it. Next is The Spanish Love Deception. This book is so very simple, and I really enjoyed it for its simplicity. I feel like a lot of the time books can be hated on for being simple in their writing or too focused on a trope, but in this scenario I really enjoyed it, and I liked that it was just like a fun little, I was just like along for this ride, and it was a vacation setting, so it just felt really like I was there too and I was having fun as well, and I didn't feel the need to take it so seriously, which sometimes I really appreciate that in a book. After reading a book like 1,000 Boy Kisses, I love some levity. Next is Below Zero. It's the last short story from Ali Hazelwood's book, Loath to Love You, I think is what it's called. But basically this one was really interesting actually. It's sort of, there was more stakes to this one than the other two stories that were in the short story book. And what I really enjoyed about this one is just how much action there was compared to how little the characters were like fleshed out it didn't really bother me because I enjoyed it so much. Like, I enjoyed what was happening, and I liked the concept that I didn't really need to know that much about the people themselves because, like, I got it. Like, I understood it, like, as soon as we got introduced to them. So that was something I really enjoyed, is just like the simplicity of the characters versus like the severity of the action. I felt like it had a perfect balance. My last 4-star book is Love Theoretically, another Ali Hazelwood book. This one was not as good as Love on the Brain or The Love Hypothesis, but I still really enjoyed it. I liked the characters, and I kind of like how simple they got together. I feel like a lot of time there's so many like hoops to jump over before a couple can get together in a book. I kind of like that they sort of just settled into this like pattern, and they felt like they really liked each other, and that was something that I really appreciated. So I thought it was a really good book. The way that the relationship like impacts each individual person, I thought was really important, because I hate when the only conflict in the relationship is the relationship. You know what I mean? Like, I hate it when their conflict is that they argue or something like that. Like, I love it when the conflict is one person's problem versus another person's problem. Lastly, 5-star books. I've actually already had 4 5-star books in 2024, which is absolutely crazy because people always talk about their 5-star reads. Until like this year, I had only ever had like 2 5-star reads. Like, crazy. So to have 4 in 1 year is absolutely insane for me, and I couldn't tell at first if it was because my standards were lowering or if I just enjoy reading more now. So first we have Educated by Tara Westover. This book was so good, and it explored so many difficult subjects. It's a nonfiction book about Mormonism and how this girl grew up in a family where religion was an extremely overarching thing in their family, but it wasn't executed well, and how that affected her throughout her life, and the things that she normalized that were not normal at all, and the experiences that she has to this day that bring her back to that trauma of how she grew up, and how you don't necessarily hate people for what they did to you, and how it's so difficult to overcome trauma, especially when you still have love for the people that you know and the people that did those things to you. And I found that to be a really powerful story, so I really enjoyed it for that reason. Next is The Love Hypothesis. This seems like such a silly one to rate 5 stars, but I genuinely have so much fun when I read this book. It is just incredible. Like, I have no words about this book. It's so good. The characters are wonderful. They're great people. I love reading about them. She's quirky but not annoying. He's like brooding but not frustrating. And it actually talks about really serious issues, but not in an annoying way. Like, it talks about daily issues being a woman in STEM, and I found that really important. And the worst character in the book is a great example of how women are mistreated, and it's so good, and it made me like giggle, and it made me angry, and it's just perfect. It's a perfect book. I love it so much. It is one of my favorite romance books ever. Next is the first Harry Potter book. I rated this 5 stars always because it's my childhood book. I turned 18 in the fall, so I wanted to read it one more time before I was 18 because I just love it so much. So I did rate it 5 stars still, and it will probably always be 5 stars, even if I may not connect to it as much as I did when I was younger. Like, the nostalgia will always keep it a 5 star for me. Next is Malibu Rising, which also got a 5 stars. I rated this a 5 stars because of the character dynamics. It's an amazing character study, and while it seems like not a lot is happening, going back and forth between past and present is usually a huge pet peeve of mine. In this scenario, I loved it so much because as you're exploring this huge party that they have every year, right? While you're exploring this party, you're switching back and forth between their past and their present. So as you're getting context from their past, you're exploring these new things in their present that are like so pivotal for the moment. And my favorite thing ever is Kit in this book. Nina, J. Hud, and Kit are the siblings in this, and they're the main characters. And I loved Kit's perspective, and the way that she navigates life is so different to the rest of her siblings. And this also is a great example of how the same exact things can happen to a person, and 2 people can experience those things completely different. It's one of the things that like really baffles me, and I enjoy it so much. Next is Twisted Games. This was the first book that I read in the year, and I started off with a bang. Like, this is such a good book. It is my third favorite romance, second favorite romance, third favorite. I think it's my third favorite romance ever. It is just, oh. So it starts kind of slow, I'm not gonna lie, but then when it starts, like it starts, so it's like a secret relationship type thing, right? And the bodyguard, Rise, and Bridget, the like princess of this like fictional place, and it sort of goes back and forth between their dynamic of being like, you annoy me because you don't let me do what I want to do, and like I'm trying to protect you. Also, this is the only book with spice I've ever really enjoyed. I don't usually like spice in books. It usually makes me uncomfortable, and I don't like reading it per se, but also I also think it adds something to a book though, because when I read books without spice, it's like boring. Then we have The Great Gatsby, which I actually read earlier on in the year, and I rated it like 2 stars. I was not a fan, and then I watched the movie, and then upon rereading it again, I loved it so much more. Even when nothing's happening, the literature just like pulls you through. The first time I read it, I wasn't focused on the literature, I was focused on the drama. And the second time, focusing on the literature and really reading into things, I saw how good of a book it was. I think I made fun of it in a video before where I was like, sometimes classics are just classics so they're old. Sometimes classics aren't good, which I still stand by, but this book is no longer in that category for me. Top book of this year, my all-time favorite romance book, is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Mazer. This book, bruh, I might start crying. This book is literally the epitome of everything I have ever wanted in life ever. It's so cute, and it feels like such a like it just feels like the perfect movie that you would watch, you know? It's just like the perfect little like chick flick movie, except for it actually has some really important like subject matter and like the grief that the girl is going through in this book, and you see how it impacts all of her relationships and how she wants to get close to people but she can't, and it's like her neighbor who's the love interest, and it's so sweet because they like kind of hated each other before, and he like tries to help her like get a boyfriend, so it's kind of like a fake dating, I'm not gonna lie, but it's not like annoying fake dating. The reason for rating it 5 stars is because it's so charming. Like, it is such a charming book, and it actually made me laugh so many times. I don't laugh at books very often. I don't typically find books funny, and typically when I find books funny, I laugh and then I realize I'm laughing at words on paper, actually laughing out loud, and I was not embarrassed, and I did not feel any way about it. I just was like, wow, this is a funny book. Like, I am not ashamed to be laughing at this book right now. Like, it is funny, and it is actually so much fun. And the freaking scene when her nose is like gushing blood and he like gives her his shirt to like put on the blood, it's like the perfect mix of like an adult romance book plus like a high school feel of like coming of age book. It's just perfect. It's a perfect book. That wraps up my like all the books I've read this year so far. Overall, it's been such a good reading year. There have been some books that I absolutely hated, obviously, that I talked about, but I have had so many good reads, and I have had so many mediocre reads, but it's been such a good year for me so far. Like, I have not burned out yet. I have not had like a single month where I was like hating reading. Like, even when I was busy, I was still thinking to myself how I wanted to read. And that's just so great for me because last year was rough. I didn't want to pick up a book for months. There's so many more books that I want to read, which I think is just so great because I've already read like almost 50 books, and there's still so many that I want to read. Like, I'm not at a loss for what to read. So that being said, I hope you enjoy your day. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.